So, who wants to go first?
All right. Well, there were a couple of questions in here that collaboration aspect of things now that we've gone remote. I'm trying to find it now. So Charlene Wyrick asked how to facilitate collaborative problem solving now that we're online. And then I feel like there was another one in here about that. Oh, where did it go? I know somebody asked about writing on Zoom routines without using a whiteboard. There was something, oh, there it is. Timothy McKnight asked about finding a way to facilitate small group work with a shared whiteboard space. And if anybody's kind of figured anything out doing that, I know that's something I kind of had in my mind too with how to do that collaboration. I've been using Seesaw, but it's not in live time, just so that students can post their work. And I usually wait 24 hours and then I have it go live. And then I have students comment on each other's work and I comment and ask questions. And we kind of have an ongoing conversation that way. But I don't know what else have other people done to foster that collaboration. Because I think remote learning definitely feels really isolating, personally.
So first of all, you mentioned Seesaw. There was a question in the comments about what is Seesaw?
So it's one of the online learning platforms that's out there. Like I guess the thing that would be maybe kind of closest akin to might be like Canvas. I know I'm using that for my grad class. What's nice about it is, and the reason why I chose to do it, is that Seesaw gives students the ability to type and to draw and to do all different kinds of things within the platform. So when I upload an assignment, oftentimes I'll upload, their worksheet or whatever, and they can write and draw all over it. Or I can just set up kind of like a whiteboard thing that they can then type and draw, or they can, if they drew a picture on paper, they can take a picture of it and upload it, or they can pull in pictures and clip art from the internet. So I did it because it gives that freedom and flexibility, especially since we do so much drawing in physics. And so that's what that is.
I just put a link in the chat to Seesaw if you want to see it.
Someone asked if it allows synchronous working. Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, one of the tools that I have used as we get ready for AP tests is a Google Jamboard, which I know is very limited in its functionality, and so maybe it's not what you want to use. You can basically draw with a pen and put like a post-it note of text, and that's it. But it does allow for synchronous work, which is nice. And so, and then you can also, within like one link of a Google Jamboard, you can create, I'm going to call them slides. They're called something else, but you can create several like boards in a row. And so with that, I actually took an AP free response question and like plugged in the different parts of the question on different boards, and then had that as a link ready to go that I could send to my students. And so what we did is we got into a Zoom meeting like this. I broke them off into little breakout rooms so they could talk with each other within Zoom. And then I made copies of that Google Jamboard and gave each breakout group a different unique link with a copy of their own copy of that board. And so we did that for sort of an AP review to foster some of that collaboration. The question was there and they were able to draw on it, and it worked pretty well. It's not, as fast as maybe doing it in a physical whiteboard because drawing with a mouse or a trackpad is kind of awkward, but I think it went well for what it was. The Google Jamboard, the other downside of it is your district needs to have the right kind of Google account. It can't just be, you gotta have, I don't know what level it is or whatever. Your students don't have to be at that level as long as you share the board with them, but you have to be at a certain level to have access to Jamboards. But it seemed to work pretty well. The Jamboard, I see in the chat, how did it allow for voice communication? It didn't. So we were also plugged into Zoom at the same time. And so they were talking through Zoom and then using the Jamboard. It'd be nice if that were all in the same platform. If your school uses Schoology, it looks like there might be some way to use there's meetings or something like in Schoology that you can use that I noticed, but then I didn't actually explore it enough to actually see if it was any good, but it seemed like that might be the route to go because it's all on the same platform. Zoom does not have a whiteboard feature, no. That'd be cool though.
I think it does, actually.
Does it? Am I wrong about that? That'd be amazing.
You know, you can share your screen. So like in my mind, if we did synchronous
Oh, here you
go.
go.
I was thinking of that, like, you know, doing it that way, but
Here's a Zoom whiteboard.
yeah. Oh, cool.
That is nice. That isn't
I think
multiple people working on it at the same time though. So it's not
I think if
not that same, but it's good. Yeah, go ahead, Marianna, sorry.
I don't know, maybe Mark, maybe you know better than I do. I haven't tried this, but if you screen share, don't you have the option of like letting other people edit your screen or have access to it?
I believe so, that you can have multiple, one of the settings inside Zoom is to let multiple people screen share at the same time.
So yeah, so then you could.
I see Andrew has a comment.
Yeah, I've been like, you know, teacher for quite a while, but a STEM program was discontinued, so that now I'm teaching an incarcerated education program. And part of that is at a correctional center, or was until now, until this, until the pandemic. But we still meet with Zoom, using Zoom, with some students who are like on parole or in this program as an alternative to incarceration. So it's funny because a couple of weeks ago, I saw a speck of dust on my laptop screen, flicked it off. I've had the laptop for a year and found out it was a touch screen. So, so I started using the whiteboard with them, and on Zoom, a virtual whiteboard, and I have a pencil wrapped with gauze and a rubber band, which I dip in water, and then I can write. And the problem, and what really made me make the comment, is you were saying, how can I get the students to share the whiteboard? As you'd expect, I have some disruptive students. So they found out how, so that they started writing stuff, trying to teach someone, so that my problem is how to disable them from doing it.
I mean, the kids draw stuff on their whiteboards in the real classroom too. So there's,
Yeah, no, well,
always there. Right?
In my better days, I had many, many whiteboards. Students would be up, doing it all on panels, and it's a great way to teach. Thanks for listening to my story. Oops, the lawnmower's going.
So there's another question that was submitted from Kathy Willard about all the different online tools that are out there, from Pivot Interactions to WebAssign, Sapling, which I don't know about, Mastering Physics. There's so many of these online tools to bring students together asynchronously. Has anyone been able to use those, or can anyone tell me what Sapling is?
Does anyone know Sapling? I've never heard.
I'll jump in. I have heard of Sapling, only because our district is in the process of updating curriculum resources for next school year. And we had a day where a bunch of people came in and advertised at us. Sapling is just like WebAssign or Mastering Physics. It's just do that. I think it's tied to textbooks and publishers. From that one day experience, from what I could tell, like WebAssign, Mastering Physics, and Sapling are way more similar than they are different. Like I had no reason to really prefer one over the other. The Mastering, I'm using WebAssign this year. I'm kind of over it, but really I'm more over the textbook I have, which is this old Survey textbook and very math heavy and not helpful for AP Physics 1. And so I think that's more the problem than WebAssign. But next year, I'll be using Mastering Physics with, we're doing the Akina textbook, which I'm excited about. But anyway, so Mastering Physics seems a little bit better in that the types of questions they have are still mostly plug in a number, but there are other types of questions too, which seems helpful. There's some ranking tasks in there. There's there's some vector drawing, although I've been told that it's like too finicky to actually be like useful without being super annoying. So those are all the same. Then the other one that's very different in that list was Pivot Interactives, which they are doing like a 30-day like free subscription for teachers. At least they were at the beginning of this. If you haven't checked it out, I just did through that, and like I'm hooked on the thing. Like it seems incredible. And then I asked if I could use it. It was like they're offering it for, was it $1 a high school student or something like that? It was super cheap. I went to our district science coordinator and like, this is inexpensive. Like, we can do this, right? And they said, no, they have to go through some vetting process of, is this some good digital resource? And there's no time for that. So no, we can't use it right now, maybe next year. And so I didn't get to use it, which is sad, but she seemed very optimistic that it could happen at the beginning of next school year. I will 100% like be pushing for that. Like the ability that it has to really, it's video analysis is what it is. They have a bunch of labs built in. And so I think it's nice to go through physics things in slow motion, which video analysis allows you to do. And you can draw a motion map directly on the motion of an actual physical scenario, and you can actually make measurements. Like that seems like an incredibly powerful tool. So if you have access to that, especially for online next fall, which seems, I don't know, like it seems almost like a vital resource. Like it seems like that is going to be one of my go-to things next year if I can make it happen.
And Peter's on here, so he can answer any other questions people have too. But yeah, I second it, and I saw other people nodding and like thumbs upping. Always talking about it. I got hooked on things back when it was free direct measurement videos. Thanks to Martha Lee from my AP workshop. And then when they were no longer free anymore, I was really sad. And so I pushed really, really hard to get the subscription for my kids at school, which I did. And so when we were, and yeah, as Helen pointed out, you can make your own interactives as well, which is fabulous. I mean, it's totally customizable to your needs, which is really, really great. So, you know, my AP kids use it on their super, super high end, but I can use it with my regular level students on that more conceptual end. So it's such a fabulous tool. So they didn't say anything to us about schools, like at all. Like we didn't even have a district plan. Well, as far as we knew on our level, teachers, going into spring break. And, but in my head all week, I was thinking about, okay, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? What's it going to look like? And then we found out Friday, right before spring break at 5 o'clock, that schools were closed for the next couple of weeks. And I was like, well, this is great. I already know what my plans are. I'm set for the next couple of weeks because I've got Pivot, which is helpful. I found since shifting that I need to adjust the way that I'm approaching it a little bit, because I have been using it in such a way that my students are using it in class. So they're each doing their own work, but they're still getting that collaborative aspect. Now that they're at home, some of my students that are, more likely to stop working if they get stuck, are finding more frustrations with it. So, but that has to do more with the way that, I'm approaching my remote learning than anything else.
I used Physics Aviary Spring Lab and Pivot Interactives to do a more traditional Hooke's Law lab than can be done with the videos on Pivot directly, and that worked reasonably well. Right now I'm nuts. I'm doing biophysics and astrophysics at the same time across several classes. And so I have some very minimally scaffolded labs. Like I have this week, the biophysics group is doing gate analysis with some videos that I got from a stock video site, and I posted them to Pivot, and they're going to be estimating leg lengths and stride lengths and trying to see if they can figure. So.
Yeah, that's great. I actually taught a neuroscience course in combination with my physics class in high school. And there's a lot of great physics that involved in neuroscience. In fact, my students got kind of annoyed because they kept saying, why we thought this was biology, and no, it's actually just physics and vectors again. And they were very annoyed, which made me happy.
My daughter is a neuroscience grad student, and she was very upset that there was E&M in her neuro class.
It's all about voltage.
Yep.
They all are so surprised when they get to like med programs or nursing school, and they're like, and there's physics. Nobody told me.
Yeah, I actually did tell you. You just don't remember.
Well, I don't always get them because they don't need physics.
We do physics in 9th grade, so they all get it.
Ah, good deal.
I will point out another good AAPT resource on this, which is the Living Physics Portal, which is a just beginning collaboration where physics teachers that are looking for biophysics materials are a way to post it and to kind of use teaching materials that other people have. It is growing, but there's some really good stuff on there if you're looking to bring in more biophysics and more just biology in general into your physics courses.
Yeah, very nice. I want to hear more from people who have used Pivot successfully, either in the classroom or with online learning right now, because that is the one resource I want to check out a lot more whenever I get the okay to actually use it in my classroom.
Theodore Godis here from Oakton Community College. I used the videos when they were online before, I forget what it was called now, and then this semester I used the pivots for that 1 month free trial. I do love them. My students enjoy them actually for the most part. The only problem is it's $5 a student, and my school was not willing to pay for that. So we got denied. And now they're, with a lot of schools, at least I'm at a community college, so they're looking at the bottom line right now because they're not sure what enrollment's going to be. So, but yeah, I highly recommend them.
I'm trying it this week for the first time, so hopefully I have some students that interact with it and I can see.
Yeah, and you can see their work as they're working on it because it saves as they go. So, even if it's assigned, if you give them like 3-4 days to work on it, you can actually go in to like grade it and you can see what they've done so far. So that's kind of nice. If you notice they're all getting stuck in the same spot, then
okay.
kind of tag in. I know as we're talking about remote learning, one of the things that I've been doing, we're not allowed to do any synchronous work in our district for equity reasons. So I had a couple pivot assignments that I used a couple weeks ago. We've been doing waves, and I was noticing that they were doing the relationship, wavelength and frequency to get velocity, that whole deal. And some of the students, and I don't blame them, their graphs looked like they were almost linear, as opposed to having that that curve, noticeable curve for the inverse relationship. And so they look at it and they're like, well, obviously it's linear. They do this, they do the slope. They've got a negative slope on there and stuff. So, and that popped up in like half of my kids. So what I've been doing is kind of like after a week of work, I'll do record a video where I'll go over some of those sticking points on the lab. And so I went through and kind of had the conversation I would have had with my students in class, and then I post those. And I know my students have been commenting that kind of way of touching base has been helpful for them, and to do that in that kind of asynchronous fashion.
One thing to watch on Pivot is sometimes there's too much information there. So if I'm trying to have kids figure things out, I have to block it off so they can't see that, hey, by the way, here's what's really going on, because I want them to work it out themselves.
Fortunately, they're editable.
Yes.
Now, if only I can talk Peter into putting rubrics on.
There doesn't seem a way for a student to mark like, yes, I am done with this assignment on it, to turn it in.
You just told the right person.
Okay.
Yes, Kathy, we're working on adding that. I don't know if my microphone is working, but that's a great suggestion. We've had it from a number of people, a way to have students be able to tell you that they're finished with the activity. And yeah, and honestly, this is a great. I mean, I'm writing notes furiously about everything you're saying, and we are looking to teachers to figure out how to make this better. So it's all very useful.
Oh yeah.
Keep going.
Can I just say something about it as well? Hi everyone. I've used it in breakout rooms. I think what I've learned from doing it like remote, we have to do I'm doing synchronous lessons every day. So today I've been online. I've been on Zoom lessons since 9:30. So my brain is a little fried. So sorry, but it's really nice to be able to like just drop in and listen to the chat as a sort of form of formative assessment. But I have learned how important it is to kind of do the whole priming, framing thing beforehand and kind of go through it, because otherwise they can go off like in all sorts of directions that you don't want them to. And I've kind of pulled back a little bit so that we're using it to talk a lot more about getting like good data and how out of the experiment and what that looks like. And also I have let them kind of, do the classic, let them do it wrong, let them plot the wrong thing, let them, and then come back. And that's been really useful. But what I like with Zoom, with, in the high school, just having randomly assigned groupings has been also extremely useful. Because kids are having to work with people they wouldn't necessarily, or it's more difficult to do that, and that's very good for them as well. So it's kind of facilitated lots of other things that aren't necessarily just about the physics. But I really like them. But it's an interesting, I can't, forgive me, remember who was saying about physics aviary. We actually talk sometimes about the fact that you have an algorithm behind the physics aviary animations. A lot of these things are driven by somebody writing a program to make it do that. So the results are going to look the way that you expect them to look. Whereas when you cut the string and the bicycle wheel falls, nothing is like telling the center of mass gravity. The universe is telling it. Who knows who's telling it? But it's doing that. It's doing that. And that's what it's doing, and it's not a case of, is that right? Well, that is it. It's, we videoed that, and that's it. So, and I also have a suggestion. I didn't realize we were moving on from the earlier suggestions. I have another suggestion later on about collaborative online, synchronous. So whenever there's a moment, I can talk about that.
If I could, one of the things I'd like to address is what Joshua was saying before, that in my own using Pivot Interactives in the class, I've always put fewer instructions and let the students get in their groups and whiteboard a very vague question that where I know they're not going to be able to find the answer. And that's great because they dig in and they explore and they're creative and they get stuck. And then they collaborate, they talk, they share about what they've done, and then that's how they build their knowledge. And so when we went to online learning, I assumed that would happen, and it doesn't happen nearly as easily. So that's what I've found that I have to change, is that I think when they're sitting alone and they look at it and they have a question, they get stuck much, much sooner. It really shows why collaborative learning and learning with groups and discourse is so powerful, that when you take that away, they are stuck. And so that's caused me to go through and like a lot of the activities, I look at them and say, these are never going to work for remote learning. Thanks that you all are creative enough to go in and edit them, but we need to do that too. To say like how, I don't know if we'll have two different versions, say this is for in-class learning, this is for remote learning, but I do think the approach is very different.
Yeah. I think the very first time I had done something, and it was probably back when I was using direct measurement, and that just, it's like so often with kids, as soon as you put a computer in front of them, they stop talking to other people. And the first time, and this was back when it was just direct measurement, and I was like, talk with the people at your table, don't use the computer. And then I went to Eugenia Akina's workshop at AAPT in the summer, and of course a lot of her stuff is on Pivot as well, and just that forcing them to whiteboard something beforehand and then work in the lab on Pivot and then whiteboard after, and actually integrating that into the structure of your lesson makes all the difference in the world. And then, but if you already know to do that, then it's like, oh, if you take it away, all of a sudden we don't know what to do. So, I guess maybe that would be something to consider, I think, is as we're using Pivot for remote, is finding a way to kind of do that collaboration aspect of things before, during, and after when we assign them.
So, one thing that's as we talk about collaboration, a reoccurring conversation point between many of the sessions that we've had here at AAPT is that Zoom has this breakout room function, which is really convenient for putting kids into smaller groups and hopefully collaborating. But because of the well-publicized security issues with Zoom, a lot of school districts don't let teachers use Zoom, and they want them to use Google Classroom or Blackboard or other more kind of traditional LMSs. Has anyone found, what is the breakout room analogy for Google Hangouts?
There isn't one. I haven't found one, at least. I've been holding lots of half-hour meetings, and some kids come to all of them and some kids come to none of them. And today I had a student tell me he wants to switch which topic he's working on because the first lab was too hard for the one he chose originally, but he never asked for help, and I'm just sad about that. So McKnight has a question.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I was just going to give a comment. The Google Meet, the only workaround that's been suggested, and I tried it and failed gloriously at it, is you set up multiple additional meets and provide the kids with a link. I set up a Google Doc for that and presented them with a Google Doc, and they selected their groups. So I kept the same groups we'd had in the classroom. But then trying to go from room to room, you have to, there's 100 button clicks. You have to mute this, you have to mute one tab and then go to the other. And at one point it was just a cacophony. So, that's been suggested, but I haven't been able to master it.
I just want to just quick comment. It's not related to the physics stuff. I've noticed some people are raising hands to put comments. We can't necessarily see everybody's faces. I know right now I can see, I think I've got 24 faces up, but we've got like 48 people in the room right now. So you do need to just speak up because we can't necessarily see that you're saying you want to add.
Yeah. I am trying to watch the little hand raise feature in the participant list, but even that's not.
I think
you're just
Okay.
speak up. It's better.
Okay, just real quick. I saw somebody wrote in the chat about whether Logger Pro was free, and then someone else wrote, which was correct. If you bought it once, you can, your students can, can download it. And I just want to say, I've been to a couple of their workshops, and they're very, very generous with their software. I mean, they really do have like an altruistic mission. And my former principal allowed me to loot my old physics lab, so that I've kind of made it a physics lab here at home, which I use a lot with Logger Pro for those incarcerated students. And they like the demos that I've been showing the waveforms, and I also use Desmos for waveforms. So if you can't get it free, just try giving them a call, see what they'll say. Because if you bought the sensors, even from a third party, they're likely to help you out. So I just want to say that. And and they're very easy demos that you can share the screen, use the camera, and then share the screen to share the Logger Pro window, so that you can actually do pretty nice demos remotely. Though I must say that that's the reception I got when I demonstrated beats, a stone silence.
No, that is cool. No, and I will like throw in there like Vernier and Pasco both like customer service second to none. So like I am sure calling either of them and like they'll hook you up. I have no doubt about that.
Yeah, except Vernier is reasonably priced. Pasco is
I
started.
I tend to lean Pasco over, or sorry, I tend to lean Vernier over Pasco, but only slightly. But
Great on seriously, this could be a very big thing. Is the banana cable, like if you get banana plugs and separately alligator clips, you've got, from Pasco, they're 4 times the amount from anywhere else, but they'll last forever. Also, they're meter sticks. It's where we insist on bending, on studying bending moments, empirically. They have really good hardwood meters. So with the exception of their generators, signal generators, which are, if you look at them, they'll break. If you look at them wrong, they'll break. But otherwise, much of their stuff is of very good quality. But Vernier is, that's my go-to for the sensor-driven data collection.
So does anyone use the third option, which is out there but harder to find, which is the German company Thuva, which is basically the German version of Vernier?
Could you write in the chat?
Absolutely. They have great stuff, but it's like BMW quality prices. It is the epitome of fine German engineering. But
sounds like it's in the public school teacher's budget then.
Completely. But they actually, I will point out, they have a really good website with a lot of great lessons, and they really separate things out nicely between high school, higher ed, like graduate student. I mean, they have like a huge, gigantic selection of stuff.
What was that name?
You can tell I lived in Germany for a little bit. The name is Phywe, PhYwe. I'll put it in the chat.
I inherited a lab full of Pasco equipment, so I'm kind of stuck with Pasco equipment for interoperability until we start using. So I've been using a lot of cell phone stuff. So the first lab for the biophysics was download your choice of physics toolbox or Firefox and use the acceleration meter to track your gait. So, and that worked reasonably well for the kids who actually did it. Some of them just took a couple seconds worth of, I took 3 steps this way. And of course they didn't get any kind of decent data that way. So.
May I make a comment?
Of course.
Okay. I see in the chat, Chris B, who mentioned Desmos for beats, and Jen Brugman, I think it is, who also mentioned Desmos. One of my favorite, I discovered Desmos in the course of teaching Calculus BC, loved it. And then one day I had a question from the Regents review book that I was having difficulty rationalizing. It's not easy to rationalize it mathematically. I mean, you can do it, but for Regents level physics, guys, it wasn't going to work. And that question was the like in standing waves, I can't remember if it was antinodes that are caused by constructive interferences in the as a multiple choice, and nodes due to destructive interference. So what I did with Desmos was to create 2 waves, one traveling to the left, one with, like along the lines of kx plus omega t and kx minus omega t. And then had them, having them interfere and being able to selectively display, call it y1, y2, and y1 plus y2. And what's interesting is when you show the standing wave where you've got those big antinodes, you see that most of the region has constructive interference and a very small region has destructive. Where? right around the nose. And then when you display, you freeze the waveform where the superposition makes it so that it's almost like all zeroed out. You freeze it and you then look at where constructive and destructive interference occurs. And most of the places, most of the region is destructive interference with just one little place of constructive, where the antinodes. So it's just a very nice visual demo. It's now my favorite application from Desmos. Maybe for next time I'll set it up if you'd be into it, and I could share the screen and show it for our next meeting if you want. I did it a little. Okay. I think you'll like it.
Yeah, I think there's nothing that Desmos can't do.
I love it.
It's like a rabbit hole. Keep going, and you go, what can I build? It's
Desmos can do just about anything, and like easily also as far as other programs. Like, it is so straightforward. It's incredible.
I did last time. I did put a link in the chat to a user guide. Someone had said had some difficulty getting started. So, but it's like anything, any Windows-driven thing or event-driven software. You're like in a kitchen and you've got to find out what's in the cabinets. It's do it by gosh and by golly, and
And then you fall into the rabbit hole of trying to program the teacher activities to give feedback to students, and that's a whole. You end up spending hours and hours and hours on that. I bug Dan Meyer directly when I have Desmos questions. And then he pawns me off on Jay Chow, and it's all good. So I actually was wondering how people assess the science practices. Because I'm thinking that might be easier to do than to assess content, because content, they can certainly always take a look at Google, and any math problem we can assign high school students, Wolfram Alpha will give them an answer in seconds once they find it. So I was kind of wondering if people have thought about assessing practices instead of content, and how you're doing that.
And then GSS.
Yeah. But it's the how,
In my mind, in some perfect world, I've created a beautiful rubric for such things where I have more time.
I will be presenting a little bit on that next week at this coffee hour. So just a little advertisement.
That's great.
Yeah, I think that idea of content is cheap is something that we're struggling with here with our students. We call them working scientifically skills that we're trying to assess, and we're trying to move away from weighting the product of what they produce too highly, and instead look at the process that they're using, and that's a really tricky thing to try and assess. We are experimenting with having them make like a little video log statement, something which they can rehearse and communicate in a short period of time, so that we can try and A, check the authorship of their work and make sure they know what they're talking about, and B, trying to get a sense of having them make a choice about what challenges they faced, how they problem solved, those sorts of things, and put them a bit more in the driver's seat of their learning. They have to actually be able to reflect on what it is that they've learned. And I think a video format is probably a good one that you can then double mark. You can, you don't have that pressure of like a speech or something terrible like that. So that's sort of what we're looking at.
Hello, I just joined, and I mostly teach chemistry, but I'm back to physics this year. And I was thinking about that same question, and for our final this year, I gave the students the final 2 weeks early, and then on the day of the final, they're just randomly assigned, but like I know what problems are what, that they have to make a video explaining those. Just like the day of the final, they don't know what they're going to have to explain, but they have to come in ready to explain anything. And so I like, is it Chris? Is that right? Yeah. And I've really liked that a lot. And I just started grading them today, but I felt way more confident giving them a grade based on what they know, because they had to explain things, and they can't just say, and then you plug this number here. It was like, no, you need to say like what that is, and why that next, and what does this mean? And so, yeah, I've really liked it a lot.
Yeah, Katie, I just saw your tweet about that actually, and about doing the videos. And I know, I think Red Elaine has done that as like test retake in place of test retakes. He has the kids he's like, pick a question, and then
that's great. Oh my gosh, that's a game changer.
His response was the same as yours. It's just, when you watch that video, how well the kid knows it. By the type of question they picked, how they choose to solve it and explain it, because some of them will pick a textbook question, some of them will make up their own. And so I did that this school year as well for my students, to give them retake opportunities, if they have them make those videos, which in the retake case, you're not necessarily doing, the 4 questions and all of 100% of your students. So it's a little bit faster to do, but I think that video thing is a really
and I also loved it for the kids who just take longer on a test. Like they have all 2 weeks to do it. And so if someone wants to work their butt off and do an amazing job and have explanations ready for everything, they can. And if someone doesn't, then they don't have to. And it just left a lot more agency up to the student while still having high stakes pressure.
And also the 30-second video clip represents an hour's, 2 hours worth of work, and you can mark it by only rewatching the 30-second clip again and again.
Right, and putting it on 1.5 or 2 times the speed.
I have recently become also very pro video assessment. It's something I'm doing recently with the remote learning, because otherwise, how do I know if they're not just copying it off of Yahoo Answers and submitting it to me, right? Which is always a concern. But what I've done it now as we're getting ready for AP tests, is I just gave them a list of, here are the past AP Physics 1 and 2 questions. Here's the type of question they are and what they're about. Pick 2 of these, do it. Here's the scoring guide, correct it, and then make a quick video telling me what you learned, both by trying the problem and by correcting it with the scoring guide. And it's that video that I'm assessing. And so it's a low stakes sort of situation, because it's not, oh my gosh, I only got 5 out of the 13 points on this AP question. That's they're able to learn from those mistakes. And also they're doing most of the grading of it themselves, which is A, saves me time, and B, is more valuable for them to have that self-reflection on their learning. So video assessments, super cool. And yeah, you can go the 1.5 times the speed, which is also great. And I also know they're doing that to me with my videos, which fine, fair game.
That's right. Yeah, someone, another chemistry teacher said that he's even been giving them former students' work, and it's all done, and it might be right or wrong or otherwise, but then asking them questions about it specifically, so that their focus is 100% on the process of what must have been happening, or like, what do you think the student did first? Or like, what was this error? Like, why is this wrong? And what should they have done differently? And yeah, I thought that was pretty low effort on the teacher part, but high output for the student learning.
So I have 2 questions on this, because I'm super interested in the video retake process. 1, what's the typical length of these? And 2, how do students, do they just talk? Do they do voiceover PowerPoints? Like, how do they communicate? How do they show that process other than just describing it verbally?
I had kids do that 3rd marking period, because we had gone we had gone to distance learning and they hadn't done the retakes that they would have done in class. And what I told them was that I wanted to see their work and hear their voice. So most of them held a cell phone camera above a piece of paper and talked through it as they were working. A couple of them didn't have a cell phone camera that worked, so they had their Chromebook webcam, and they would talk some and then hold up a piece of paper up to the you know, just hold up a piece of paper like that to the screen and show me what they had written. And they were generally between like 30 seconds and a couple of minutes long. So, and I'm not going back to paper retakes next year. It's just not happening. It's going to be videos.
Cool.
Yeah, for me, I told them make it under 5 minutes because I didn't want anything too long. I didn't have the time to watch a lot of really long videos. And yeah, I told them make it however you want. A lot of them did just write down an answer on a paper and then record with their cell phone. One of them had like a whiteboard in their room where they like wrote it all out on a whiteboard and then they showed a video of the whiteboard. It was like this beautifully done piece of physics artwork. A few of them decided to go PowerPoint, and like they made a PowerPoint of their answers, then talked through it using video like recording software. By the way, Loom, LLOM, is one of my favorite new tools for recording screens. Like 10 out of 10 do recommend it if you're looking for a good like video screen recording tool. But
Joe, does that have a time limit, and does it upload to Google Drive?
It does not have a time limit to my knowledge, and I've recorded some longer videos, like upwards of 15 or 20 minutes. And then it does not upload directly to Google Drive, but it does create a shareable link right away.
Okay.
So,
I think
so not quite, but it's
I've
good.
also used
Could you write that into the chat, please?
Yes.
Screen. Yeah, I'll put it here.
Loom was it, or?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Screen.
Does it have an editor?
I don't think so. It might. I think you can crop off either end or something like that, but nothing fancy.
Look in the cabinets.
Yeah,
I'm not trying to edit any videos either during this time. It gets made, it gets sent out. Like if if there's weird pauses or anything like that, that's just what it is.
I've been using Screencastify to edit out technical difficulties, off-topic student conversation, things like that, so that I can record my office hours and then post it for the kids who couldn't make it.
Just as far as Mark, your question with the test, this is my first time doing it and it's a test, so I was kind of like, please make the time limit short. Some of them are super long, that's a bummer. But I kind of put that on me too. Like I can be more specific about what exactly I want them to explain, and like don't reread the question, just get right to explaining the answer. Or so I think it's a problem I'm willing to work around, like be more specific with what I want them to do, and then they give me what I want to see.
Yeah, I'm really interested in exploring that more, and I think it'd be a really good thing as more and more people try it to share it, or even we're always looking for good articles for the physics teacher journal, right? And we always love submissions from teachers on these types of things. I think that would be a really great and a very interesting submission from teachers as they see how it plays out for them. By the way, the other thing that people were talking about was video recording software. I've been playing around with OBS, which is open source broadcasting system, which is probably a little too techy. There's a little bit of a learning curve, but you can make really nice videos like with bars at the bottom and like picture in picture, and you can get pretty fancy if you choose to do that. But it's open source and free, and I would not recommend it for student videos because the learning curve is too high. But if you think that your future has you recording yourself doing more kind of asynchronous, watch this video, learn something type structure, OBS is a pretty fancy system for that, and free.
I thought relatively small classes, so this may not be universally applicable, but it was going to happen anyway. But I'm teaching the UK GCSE course because that's what I know and love. And there's a section we all do that, don't we? There's a section at the end which is all about sort of global impact of physics and everything else. And so at the beginning of the year, they choose a section of that, which they then teach the rest of the class. So my last 3 weeks, two weeks, are just them teaching these little nuggets where there's quite a lot of fairly meaty physics, but with clear applications. So we talked about GPS satellites in one of the lessons. We've talked about redshift and the difference between cosmological redshift. So it goes quite a bit beyond kind of high school. In some cases, we are touching sort of AP and beyond. But it is just, as you're saying about the video thing, there is absolutely nothing like knowing where somebody is in their learning and understanding, to see them teaching somebody else and fielding those questions from the other students is fascinating. And because they were going to have to like organize a lab for them, they've had to organize a online learning activity for them, which is really cool because I get to see all these new learning things that they find because they've just gone off and found it. And it saved me time. I can add it to my long list of stuff, and it's great. And so, but I've been writing a sort of final that I think they'll probably do. We have a long tradition of they are fairly used to having to do AP type extracting information type questions, short answer questions. We don't have any multiple choice very little multiple choice. So they're like, well, it won't help. Being able to Google it will not help with Miss Reynolds' physics exam because, it's never helped in the past. It's not going to help now. But I'm going to incorporate some questions from the things that they've taught each other, because that's how you know if somebody's learned it. So it's just really super cool. I appreciate I'm in a very, privileged position that I can use that amount of time. But even if I had a lot more kids, I think I would find a shorter time frame thing, even a 10, 15 minutes. Pick one thing you'd like the rest of these students to know, to understand, elicit from them whether or not they have understood it, because that piece of thinking is really the sort of cognitive science bit of how is it that that somebody else knows something, helps them to be metacognitively aware of what they're doing when they are learning something. So I think it has like a ripple effect benefit. And it's really fun, and you get to see all these really cool things that they dream up. And they struggle with Zoom, and they struggle with, getting people to stay on focus, just like I do. So that's reassuring. So.
I absolutely love that. And I love the piece there of how do you know that your audience has learned what you want to learn? Like that's key. And I think that's something that non-teachers don't think about unless you ask them to think about it. So that's super cool.
Neil Merman once said, I think it was in a column, he used to do a column for Physics Today, and he said it was the ultimate goal of every person giving a colloquium to maximize for as far as possible the inevitable time when 90% of your audience understands less than 10% of what you've said. By the way, if just we're like near the end, I did actually set up the Desmos demo if you'd like to see it or not. But it's 2 traveling waves and showing then where constructive and destructive interference occurs, the nodes and antinodes. I don't want to muscle in, but is that all right? Or
we just the only comment is we're running up on our hour time limit, which is no problem if you want to show it, but we're getting close to the end. So
right, that's why I thought it might be a good time, because it just takes a minute, and anyone who wants to leave could just leave. So I just do it at the end.
All right. Any last questions before we shift to the Desmos quickly? Well, if not, then this has been great. I think this has been a really vigorous conversation, and I really appreciate everyone showing up. We're going to do this again next Tuesday. We alternate times between 4 p.m. one week and then 7 p.m. East Coast, sorry, to try to space things out to give people on the West Coast different options and people that are teaching classes and things like that. So we hope to see you again next week when we already have a little bit of a preview for what next week could look like. Thanks for coming. It's been a really great conversation. And I once again want to thank the two people, once again, to my left and right in my Zoom Brady Bunch window, Marianna and Joe for hosting this. They did a great job, and I appreciate them driving the conversation and keeping everybody in order like good teachers.
For having us in, Mark. Appreciated this. This was good.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you.